Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Drew. I am an associate professor at Indiana State University. I know several of you, I'm sure, that are watching. I suspect I don't know many more of you, which is good news for us because that means new people are at the conference. My presentation today is titled, How Do You Get From Here to There? Traversing the Space Between Creative Writing Studies and Secondary English Teaching. I'm going to stick pretty closely to the slides because my first attempt at this was almost 40 minutes long, so I'm going to try to trim it down to the required time. I want to start by giving us a general sense of creative writing studies at the moment. Most of you know this, but we have a growing library of books, articles, and references. We've had, counting this one, 5 conferences, if we count the mini conference in March, and counting. My hope is number 6. We're all back together face-to-face at a real conference, not a real conference, a physical conference. This virtual one is very real. We currently are starting an imprint with Bloomsbury Academic, which I'm very excited about. I think maybe the first book is either going to press or in the editorial process. We have strengthened our interactions with AWP in the last couple of years. Our own Stephanie Vanderslice is now involved with AWP, and there was some other interaction. We had our first off-site AWP CWS mini conference in March. We have an active Facebook group that I think every day somebody asks and answers fantastic questions. And we are working hard to foster interdisciplinarity. We have a presence in composition studies at the 4Cs. We interact with disability studies, with literary studies, and the one I want to talk about today, a growing interaction with secondary education. And I give that background to suggest that we are a strong, growing discipline, and one of the directions we can go at this point is into secondary education. So there is history of interaction between creative writing and secondary education. Creative writing is present, if often hidden, in most secondary education standards. The Common Core, other various state standards, they don't talk about creative writing using that language a lot, but they talk about narrative and plot and figurative language in ways that clearly reference creative writing, even if teachers aren't always taught that way. Creative writing has been addressed at the secondary level in our own journal and at these conferences in the past by myself, by some of our colleagues. Alexa Garvoil comes to mind. It's considered tangentially in other NCT publications. English Journal and English Leadership Quarterly both have published articles relating creative writing to the secondary classroom. But a place that it is, I would argue, by and large, currently lacking is in secondary English teacher training programs. It's not lacking in all of them, but based on my own experience and viewing sort of sister programs, it's often not present. So it's important for us to understand the how and why of this last point. Why is it lacking? So that brings us up to speed on where creative writing studies is at and how it can begin to interact with secondary English teacher training and how creative writing more generally has or hasn't. So I'm going to take the first pause that was suggested here, grab a snack if you would like, and then I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. If you didn't pause it, I never went anywhere. But now I want to talk about secondary English teacher training, give you a little bit of background on it since a lot of us don't have experience with that. Some things to keep in mind. One, it's institutionally scattered. Sometimes it's housed fully in colleges of education. Sometimes it's housed fully in English departments. I think the best arrangement is often having it split between the two, much like the program that I supervise, where students do a lot of work in the College of Ed with all the teacher training candidates, but they also do their English work and get the full major in our department. It's very standards-based, which is a bit outside of the expertise of a lot of creative writing scholars and professors and teachers. It's standards-based in a lot of ways. There are SPA standards through NCTE and CAPE, which is the education accreditor. Most states have their own standards for teacher training, and a lot of teachers are trained sort of informally by having to teach to the state education standards for the grade level they student teach at. So that's at least 3 sets of standards telling students how they need to be trained to teach, and telling people like me how they need to be trained to teach. It is what I call materially nebulous. You're not going to go to Amazon or the local campus bookstore and find the textbook on English teacher training, or really any monolithic textbook. This is usually taught, these classes are usually taught more as a practicum or methods class. That's how I teach them. That's how a lot of people teach them. So there isn't a book. It's usually an assemblage of texts. And secondary English teacher training, the curriculum is usually set by former secondary English teachers who have moved on to university positions, maybe in colleges of ed. Politicians, of course, have their hand in any sort of teacher training in any state. Very few of these people have any training in creative writing. And there's also sort of a generational lag. Teachers who were trained very well for their time, say 20, 30 years ago, wouldn't have any reason to know what creative writing studies is if somebody hasn't sort of shared it with them. And then finally, to bring it all back together, I've given you the creative writing studies, half of things in a nutshell, the secondary teacher training, half of things in a nutshell. Secondary English teacher training is what I would describe creative writing adjacent at best in most colleges and universities. If it's not housed in the same department, they're not even adjacent. English teacher training happens over in the College of Ed. Creative writing happens usually in like arts and sciences, in English departments or in their own department, and never the twain shall meet. If, like at my school, they are housed in the same college or in the same department, there is some interaction, but there's not any need for interaction. An English teacher candidate at most colleges and universities can happily move from start to finish, get their license, get their degree, become a teacher, and never take creative writing. And creative writing professors and students never really have to interact with English teacher students or those professors. They don't have a lot of shared purposes or goals. One of the things I'm interested in is how we can change that. So now, take that second pause that was suggested. If you got a snack the first time, you may want to just take a nap for a while this time, but I'll still be here when that nap is over. So do what you need to do, and I will take that pause now. And now I'm back from the pause, which of course wasn't a pause for me, so I feel sort of awkward and strange. But if you did take the pause, welcome back. We're going to move on now to look at this question that is the title of the presentation. How do you get from here to there? This is a question I ask in all of my classes, not just creative writing, not just teaching methods. I think it's the central question of education in a lot of ways. And I don't know where I picked up this phrasing, but I like it and I use it. And so I'm using it here. Here's the shape it can take in some classes. How do you move from abstract to concrete? How do you move from theoretical to practical? How do you move from example to creation? How do you move from understanding to applicability? In each of these cases, you meet the students where they are. They've gotten the starting information. Okay, but how do you move to what that needs to lead to for true understanding, for true synthesis of knowledge? That's the central question in almost every course. And really, it's the central question of this presentation. I have what I think are some answers, but I don't have them all. And your answers may be better than mine. But the question is, how do you get from two discrete disciplines, creative writing and secondary English teacher training, to interdisciplinarity? These two are speaking in conversation and making new and interesting things happen. So it can be done. I'm here to tell you, we're doing some of it at our institution. And it can be done through a set of concrete steps, usually through curriculum revision and development and important conversations between sort of the stakeholders, the creative writing faculty, the English teacher training faculty. It helps when somebody is both, in my case, but I certainly wouldn't be able to do what we've done at ISU without help from my fantastic colleagues. So what do these concrete steps look like? You tie creative writing to relevant standards in teacher training. If you can convince your department, your school, your state, the accreditors that creative writing meets these standards and demonstrate how it happens, then that helps. If you can find faculty at all levels with creative writing and secondary experience, they can serve as sort of a bridge. That's certainly one of the things I do in my position. People who teach the methods courses can work to integrate creative writing methods into the materials in the text for those courses. I teach Journal of Creative Writing Studies articles, English Journal articles about creative writing, ELQ, English Leadership Quarterly articles about creative writing. I build lesson plans and assignments for my students to complete into the class. I make them write an assignment asking their students to write a poem or a short story, and to not just make it go write a story, but give it some pedagogical and standards-based underpinnings. We don't have textbooks for the most part in creative writing. I don't think we are in teacher training. I don't think we will have monolithic textbooks anytime soon, but look for books that will help. This is where I put in a quick, somewhat shameless plug for a book called Imaginative Teaching that's coming from Bloomsbury, I hope in March, that Mike Clark and Amy Ash and I have put together. It's an edited collection that is about exactly this topic, how to teach creative writing pedagogically thoughtfully in secondary English classrooms. We hope that is the first book about this, not the only book about this. So it's our hope that there's more to come, that people maybe will read this book and then take the ball and run with it. Of course, the end goal of all of this is that creative writing studies will begin to look like and cover much of the same ground at the secondary level that it does currently at the post-secondary level. Creative writing studies is involved in lots of things. It's well developed, it's robust. As I mentioned before, it ties into composition and literature and disability studies and all of these things. But those other disciplines like composition, eventually the work done at the college level, say in the 80s and 90s, became important reading and pedagogy for the secondary classroom and ultimately even the elementary classroom as time went on. I think creative writing studies is at the point where that can happen for us as well. So my phone is ringing. That is just a thing that happens when you're doing a live recording for a conference, but I suspect somebody who isn't me will answer it. So let's do this. I think, various people hold different stakes in this conversation, but I think we all can help make this happen. I'm excited about it. I get borderline evangelical about it, as I hope you can tell. So thank you. If you have any questions, absolutely come to the live Q&A portion. I believe that we are the last session. So if you've made it this far, what's one more Q&A? I believe Tim and John will be in there with me, and I look forward to seeing them and hearing what they have to say. I will upload a transcript or an outline or something like that of this as well, and I hope to include a references list and a readings list of some of the things I've mentioned. And if you want to continue this conversation, please reach out. There's my email. I'm around. Honestly, emails from colleagues will be a welcome distraction during the remote Zoom teaching of the COVID era. So thank you again. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to viewing your presentations and talking to all of you in the Q&As, and I hope to see you soon. Take care.